everybody, this is Jonathan, and today I'll be showing you guys the grid layout in JFrame. So what the grid layout does is, as you guys can see, we should be able to see a window like this, and everything will be stored in a grid. So down here is the column, and down across over there is the row. So this is the row, and down is the column. As you guys can see from the mouse, this is the column, and this is the row. So if the row goes from 1 to 3 and the column goes from 1 to 7, and the same for 2 and 8 and 3 and 9, this is basically the column, and the row goes this way, and this is the column goes down, whereas it goes across. So this is the differences between rows and columns. Okay, so as you guys can see, this is basically a fairly simple application which shows a bunch of buttons. There's numbers on them, so for example, guys can press on 1. It won't do anything because it's just a demo of how the grid layout works. But later in the series, I will be making a calculator. So you guys can just select one of these numbers. It should be able to do something, just imagine. And that should technically do something to the terminal, or it might be able to print something once you click on those one buttons, but I'm just showing up the layout. Okay, so as you guys can see from the code, we have imported some libraries. We have the grid layout. We've got the J button. We've got JFrame. The grid layout places components in a grid of cells. Each component takes up all available space within its cells, and each cell is the same size. So here is a description about it that I just read. So that's pretty nice to have that description, what a grid layout is. So I'm going to go over this code that is within the main function. That'll be the first function to be able to be ran in Java. Okay, so over there is JFrame. Frame is equal to new frame. So that allows us to create a new window of the application. Once we have created a new window, we have chosen the set default close operation to be jframe.exit on close. This basically means that it will no longer hide in the background, because by default it does that. So we're able to change it by making sure it exits on the close button. We also got frame.setSize. This allows us to set the size of the window. We also got a grid layout. We got int row, int columns. We also got int h gap. We also got int v gap. So over there allows you to customize the rows, how many items will be shown in each row, how many items will be shown in each columns, and the gaps between the actual between each of the buttons. As you guys see, there's 10 gaps. But if I was to change this one to being like a 1, then everything should be thrown in one row, right? Yes, as you guys can see, everything's indeed showing up in one row. If I change the other one to being a 1 instead, and never change one to being a 3, everything should look like this. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is the columns, isn't it? So if I just change this one to being like a 8, for example, then as you guys will see, it kind of shows up something like this. So you guys can play around with this until I find the grid layouts that we like. But I want it to be 3 by 3, so that way there's 3 rows and the columns. As you guys can see, we have 3 rows and we have 3 columns. And it goes down a list like so. You guys can change one to being a 2 with 4 rows, so it just shows up like 2 rows instead, as you guys can see. But I want to change it back to being a 3 because I liked it being 3 by 3. So that looks a lot nicer. And as I've explained earlier, this allows it to give it a gap. So if I put down a 0 and put this one also as a 0, as you guys will see, now there is going to be a gap. There won't be any gaps, I mean. So there won't be any gaps at all, because there won't be any white spaces between each of the buttons. They'll be hugging each other, they'll be connected to each other. If we don't want them to be connected to each other, we can change this one, and this one should basically change the actual content like so. It only changes the from the actual up thing and down thing. As you guys can see, when it changes like this white gap of the actual application. If I also want to change the gaps between the bottom part of the buttons as well, what you need to do is go to the second one, and then 10 again, and that should basically add a gap between each of the buttons. So either that would be on the same row, and there should be a gap for it, or either if it's going to be like below the button, there should also be a gap. But you guys can customize it and see which one looks better for you. So you guys can also increase it by doing 15, or you guys can make it bigger and so on. Over there is J button 1 is equal to new button 1. This allows me to create a new button for the application. I did this like 9 times, and then over there I've got frame.add button, so this allows me to add the button to the frame. Over there I got frame.setVisible equals to true. So for example, if I get rid of button 9 and button 8, and if I get rid of button 7, what will happen is I'm only going to show up like 6 buttons. So as you guys can see, it does indeed only show up like 6 buttons. But I'll change it to being showing up as 9 buttons again, so I can just get rid of that. And now as you guys can see, it now shows up like 9 buttons. If I get rid of this one, what you guys may notice is there's be a white gap over there, and that's totally fine. If I'm right with this styling, but you guys can obviously change the row by going back over there, and that should technically change it, as you guys can see. So if we don't really have that larger white gap, you guys can always change the row as well as the column if you truly wanted to. And now there is a lot more stuff within the second column as well, because now there are like 2 rows only. I think that's basically it really with the grid layout. So I'm going to go over this again. So if the grid layout places components in a grid of cells, each component takes all available space within its cells, and each cell is the same size, as you can see. Anyway guys, if you like this video, please put a like and please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.